Ladies and gentlemen, guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Age of Warfare podcast. I am Praetorian Actions Maximus, that is Negate Aiden Cordier, and we are back with another wonderful episode of the Age of Warfare podcast. So before today's topic, it's going to be a fun one, especially if you enjoy video games. We're going to be talking about why historical based video games are mostly PC based and not so much console. And I got a couple of interesting theories about that. But as always, before we get started, Aiden, how you doing today, my brother?
I'm doing quite well. We've had a bit of a horrible week of weather here, but it's not looking too bad today. It's going to rain later, horrendously apparently. But it's the big British have got to give me my weather updates. But as you can see, you can see behind me, which is the important bit, all my stuff is back in the kitchen. The kitchen is almost finished. Obviously, I apologise that it's still a bit messy, and the guinea pig, you can see him right there, may come and say hello at some point. But yeah, everything's going well over this end.
Yep. For me, I've just been busy working on my new book. I should be done with it in a couple of weeks. I need the first draft of it, so I'm looking forward to that. And I already got an official date for Frogs and Margaritas too. It's on the official release day of October the 29th, a couple of days before Halloween. So I'm looking forward to that. I mean, other than that, I'm doing just fine. And yeah, way to get this show on the road. And of course, before we start, our thoughts and prayers go out to Lee Edwards, the third man in this podcast. Yeah, we've been wanting to continue the Anderson the Great series that we started, but I mean, Lee unfortunately it's not getting any better of a starter, and Lee is really not doing so well. So continued thoughts for him, and hopefully whenever we come back with that, we'll deliver the goods to you. Whenever we get to back to fit up the second Anderson degree, whenever D comes back, since it was his idea, so don't want to leave him hanging. But don't worry, guys. We still got a fun episode for you guys. All right, Aiden. So of course you're no stranger, and I'm no stranger to video games on the personal computer. Especially historical based games. You got your Civilizations. You got your Age of Empires. You got Cossacks. You got Civ City Rome. You got you got Rise of Nations.
Rise of Nations. That was what I was trying to think of.
Also
Also
Age of Mythology.
Age of Mythology, yes.
By the way, before we get started, I wanna. They did come out on Steam. They came out with the Age of Mythology Retold, which is the definitive edition of the game with improved graphics and all that. But of course, I just don't have the time to discover that. And I'm kind of stuck on Age of Empires 2 definitive edition, and I'm trying to save my money because I got a big promotion coming up for my upcoming release. So gotta save the money for that. But yeah, I was thinking, Aiden, there's so many wonderful PC games, historical based video games on the PC. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about why is that the case? Why when we talk about historical based games, why is it more towards the PC than consoles? Now, it's not to say we don't have video games set in history on console games. I don't know if you remember a Spartan Total Warrior, which is an excellent,
that's a good one.
An excellent game on console. But that was more hack and slash and all that. Then you had Prince of Persia that came to consoles as well, the Prince of Persia series. Although that was more fantasy than historical, but you could kind of say historical fiction adjacent, even though it's more fiction.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
But why do you think? I mean, I have my theories, but I want to see if your theory matches mine. Why do you think that's the case? Why is there more history-based games on the personal computer over consoles?
So, as I want to think about this, I think there's two main reasons that come to mind. That's like the games that you mentioned when you talk about it, is that there are games on consoles that are historically based. You've got God of War, you've got the Assassin's Creed series, for example.
Yes.
They're all but they've all got a certain fantasy side of them that's in there as well. And I think part of it is the physical gameplay of it. If you look at the historical ones that we like, the more you're thinking your Civilization, your Age of Empires, your Cossacks, those types of games, it's building and controlling large units. Now, the input controls on a PC make that a lot easier to play, and you can have better gameplay on a PC for those games. Whereas on a console, they're more difficult. So Command and Conquer is a good example of this. It was both PC and console, yet on the console it was very difficult to play. One of the early Warhammer games that was on console that was like that, but people found it was better on PC for those controller. Allied to that is the age range of people that like historical things, are into the big creating things with that long time, being able to sit down and construct their civilization, be really into that history side of things. It tends to be an older generation. You do get a lot of younger people that are into it, obviously, but if you look at what's on a console, it's more, I hesitate to use the word instant gratification, but you can sit down and play a game. So think of something like Call of Duty.
Fortnite.
Yeah, and Fortnite, you can play a game for 15, 20 minutes. And yeah, there's progression and everything in the games, but you're doing that for that amount of time. You go back in and you reset, and then you do that again and again in different formats. But you're playing as a group, and it's very first-person based. Whereas to get a decent historical game, it's hard to do that. So where you've got the inroads of a historical into console gaming, we are talking about things like, as I say, God of War, the Assassin's Creed series and things like that. They introduce that in that type of way as well. And something I find quite interesting about it is with my son. My son's a console gamer, and I'm a PC gamer when my PC decides to work. But he, ironically, he has more time to spend on it. So it's one of those weird things. You think those games require a lot more time to spend doing that type of thing. So you'd imagine that the younger generation would be more likely to do that, whereas obviously, as we said, we find it hard to find that time to sit down and do that gaming because of the other things in our life, just general. You've got work, you've got family commitments and everything like that, whereas obviously as a child, you don't have work. Yeah, you've got school, but outside of that, really, your time's all free time unless something specifically organised. And that means that obviously playing those first-person games theoretically would work for the older people. However, the older you get, the more into history. If you like history, you'll get into history and you get quite in-depth with history as well. If you look at, say, a difference between me, I'm technically a professional historian, an amateur historian, so that would be a bracket. You and Lee would be technically amateur historians because you're not professionally trained. Yet your love and knowledge of history is on par. I know more about different parts of it. The way that I think about history is different. That's all about history education, which we've covered before. But when you like that bit of history, you go out and you buy those books and you're searching for those things. Often when you do that, you'll generally be using a PC to do those things. It's like you don't sit on your console as much and look things up. You might do it on your phone to look things up, but if you're going to look at those things and have multiple tabs open and be doing your research and stuff, you're going to be using a PC. So those people that are in that bracket of like their history tend to be PC users. Therefore, marketing, you're going to market it to the people that like those things, knowing that they have a PC to use those things. So I think they're two really big ones for me is partly that age bracket thing and the general group of people that would be into them are likely to have a PC over a console if they were given a decision.
You kind of hit on some of the points I was talking about. Before I get to what I'm thinking, it's a little tidbit that I wanted to bring up. Civilization 2, by the way, it was actually released on PlayStation 1. They actually did a release on PlayStation 1.
God, that's going back some now.
I saw a playthrough of it on YouTube. It was kind of interesting to use a controller, but it makes sense on Civilization 2 since Civilization 2 is a turn-based game. So it's kind of easier to maintain. It's kind of a little easier to control. because it's turn-based. You take it to like a chessboard. Because Civilization 2 is like a chessboard. Like you got different ISO points. It's like a checkerboard. If you really dig into the guts of a Civilization, in the Civilization series, it's all grids. It's one big grid, and you take
turns.
turns.
The big question on that is, when you play, do you have the grid on or the grid off? That's my
I play it with off. I play it off.
Yeah, I play it off, but I will turn it on when I'm building a city, just to make sure that I've got it set up correctly, and I'll turn it off again.
But see, that's the thing, and they did it released on PlayStation 2, and the biggest thing is you couldn't control the grid, it was hard to control the grid. I mean, you would have to pause it, zone the grid. It's not like on the computers. It's not more convenient, or you could just use a hotkey. Oh, and that's another thing about PC games. Something called hotkeys, where you could just type in a quick command. It's not like a console. You have to memorize a certain button combinations and all that. And the thing about consoles is that you're more limited in what you can do with a controller. It's only so much you can do.
Yes, yeah. That's a very good point, actually. The hotkey side of it. So, like when playing Age of Empires as well. Creating units that go to your hotkeys, the numbered hotkeys. You can have your 10 different units, obviously, that are numbered 1 through 0, obviously. And you can go to them. But you can't really do that with a controller.
No, you can't.
Even though, ironically, if you could do that on a console, that would make a console easier to control the game. To do it that way. But
going back to what I was saying, and as you said, they released Command and Conquer on console as well. I remember the Command and Conquer series. Although Command and Conquer is more science fiction, but it's the same idea. Base building. And I really think the fact of the matter is, I think when it comes to historical. One more thing. Rome Total War. They did release it on Android. They did release it on phone. But you could actually play Rome Total War Barbarian Invasion on your phone.
That's impressive.
Which is pretty impressive. Although I would never do it because I'm so used to the computer. And here we go again with the H bracket because I'm of an older generation where we grew up with PCs and all that. For me, I could never just see myself playing a game like that of such magnitude on a phone, better known a controller. So. But I think what it is, Aiden, for me, is that, in my opinion, it's much easier to present an entire historical period. It's much easier to present on a computer. And the fact is, on a computer, consoles and don't forget, consoles are limited by hardware. You can only fit so much into a single CD.
Even with the downloading system they've got nowadays, that's still, as you say, it's hardware. You've got to have a hard drive that's big enough, or the time to be able to download all of that information. Whereas on a PC, it's designed to be able to hold that level of information.
And don't forget, at the end of the day, as good as the console might be, a PC, you could easily upgrade a PC and upgrade its specs. And a PC will always be a more powerful computer, regardless. That's what God asked. And another thing I wanted to mention is that when it comes to the macro, the idea of macro managing, PC gives you the ability to gives you an idea of the macro ideas, but also the micro managing as well. You got a lot of micro managing to do, in PC games. Like, in Age of Empires, you got 4 ages. You got Dark Age, Feudal Age, Castle Age, and Imperial Age. And basically, you go off for 500 years of history on a PC, and you're not just playing with one civilization. You got a multitude of civilizations to play, and each of them have their own unique traits, and all that takes space and time, and not to mention all civilizations have different play styles. So there's just so much strong. I mean, in fact, I think that if I'm correct, I think the definitive edition of Age of Empires took about 10, 15 gigabytes of space on my hard drive.
That's huge. That's absolutely massive.
And by the way, I'm sorry to cut you off. And also, if you get the Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, you can actually also play the Age of Empires 1 on the Age of Empires 2 engine.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's cool. So one thing that struck me about this is if you played Hearts of Iron or any of the games, there's because you have Hearts of Iron, Victoria. 2 seconds, let me open up this folder. Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis, obviously Stellaris, but that's a sci-fi one as well. Yeah, I have all of these. And those games, the micromanagement in something like Hearts of Iron, I haven't bought expansions for most of them. I've only bought it for Crusader Kings. I bought a couple of expansions, but the micromanagement side of it, they ended up doing them as separate add-ons that you could buy because people wouldn't use them. There was so much to do that you would essentially just automate it. You click the automate button and then you concentrate on the aspect of it that you really like doing. So with Hearts of Iron, commonly you'd have everything going automatic apart from the economy and your military and how your military was set up to build as well. But with that, there's so much there to do that. And to do that, you obviously have to have menus, and you have to have drop-down menus, and you have to have different screens and clicking between them. When you look at a standard, say, console game, you have, say, you're wandering around, and then you might go into your menus. Say something like Dragon Age, for example. It's a good example. So you've got your inventory, where obviously that's where you keep your stuff. So that's an easy interface. You go in there and you look at the stuff. Brilliant. That's fairly simple as a single screen. And then you had your magic one, which when you're doing your upgrades and getting your skills, there are a few more screens to that. But you were doing that sort of rarely were you going into that. It was when you leveled up, you then went through these screens. But then the interface you'd use while you were playing the game to change around certain aspects of it was very simple, and that was a sort of a hotkey style system as close that you could get to it on there. It's one of the reasons I like Dragon Age, because it had all of these extra options on it. But that's as far as you could go. It's something that's historical. You're constantly micromanaging those things. You're constantly going through those screens. On a console, that's incredibly difficult to go into that and constantly have to flip between this one and that one, and there's too many of them. As I said, with Dragon Age, you've got your inventory and then your magic leveling and working out that. You've got two. Historical games, you'll have way more than two. One of the ones that I find interesting in Cossacks is that they managed to streamline it so much that you didn't really have as many of these drop-down menus that you used to go through. But every time that you clicked on a building to build something or do the research and things like that, you then have what is essentially a drop-down menu, but it's more integrated into the game. On a console, yes, you can do that for certain things. But if you think about, say, something like Fortnite or Call of Duty, when you walk up to something, as your avatar walks up to something, it then gives you the options of click this to interact with it in this way. Whereas obviously with that building, you don't have an avatar to walk up to it. You've got to actively go there and click on it, and then it's the functionality, like we were saying about, the hotkeys. A really good example of this. But the other thing that made me think of is, as you said about something like Age of Empires as well. It had all of the history in the background of it. You could go into it, and like Cossacks does this to a certain extent. So you essentially have a historical encyclopedia attached to your game.
Yes.
And from that, if you wanted to learn more, a lot of them had links as well. So you click on the link and it will go somewhere.
Right.
You can do that on a PC very easily. On a
console, it's very easy.
Technically, on a console, you can do that these days, but people don't browse the internet on their console. They use an app. It's just a big phone, essentially, the way that the interface works.
Yeah, I used to do that at night.
Yeah. So if people who are into the history and the people that like it want that functionality beside it, it's only recently that you've been able to do that in a more streamlined way on a PC, on a console. Whereas on a PC, it's always been that functionality. It's inbuilt to what the device you're using as well. So it lends itself better to that experience of you're not just playing a game that's cool and that you're into. You're exploring history at the same time when you're playing these games, and that's a big part of it. It isn't just here's the lore of the game; it's
to the point.
This is the history of the world.
It's to the point, right? To the point where a few times I actually used Age of Empires help text and all that, and you know the help that the help bar that it came with the encyclopedia to do reports. You could literally do historical reports just off that information. Yeah, it was just that that informative and honestly, that's how I learned my history through that. Because I mean, well, the game was fun, but I actually took the time and looked at everything. In fact, there was one session of Cossacks where I did about 10 minutes of gameplay, and then the rest was just looking at the encyclopedia, looking at everything, the tech trees and all that. I was like a total, people would say I'm a total geek. Well, yeah, okay, fair enough, but that's what I liked. It wasn't just a game. It was like you said, it was an experience. You kind of dug into, it more. And and like you said, that was something the older generation might do, like me. There was a thing about instant gratification, and there was the game companies are using more what they call gotcha mechanics, loot boxes and all that.
Yeah, it's one of the things. So I talked to my son about this quite a lot because he's when I say he's a gamer, he is a gamer. It's one of the things like, your child's just sitting playing computer games. However, he doesn't just play the computer games. He'll look up things about the computer games. The way that he looks up those things is different to the way that I would look up those things playing a historical game. Like if he's struggling with a certain part of a level, or he's looking at what may be released in a new expansion of the game, he'll be watching YouTubers explaining those certain parts of it. That's his go-to. He'll look it up on YouTube and see what other people have said. He won't go and do a Google search and then find a website that explains it with text. While obviously with history, I find YouTube a great resource for looking up history. Obviously, and things like this that we're doing, it's a great resource to do that. But my go-to is still, when I look at a piece of history, the first thing I will get up and I'll walk to my bookcase and I'll have a look through my books and see if I've got a book on it. And then I'll read a part in a book and go, all right, cool. A lot of my books are fairly old, so I will then take that. I will then go on to Tuesday and I will search for that. And I might find a YouTube video where someone explains it. There's some very good history YouTubers out there. But one of the things is my go-to, the way that I look it up, is completely different to the way that he would look it up for his games. And he's very into those games. So it's one of those weird things of, it feels weird just giving him money that it goes from one internet banking thing into the ether, and then he gets access to something else that's on the internet. Like, that money never sees the light of day. Whereas if I'm looking at historical research, like, go and get money out of a cash point and go to a bookshop. It's a completely different ethos and mindset of where you're coming from. And our generation, is particularly sort of people almost our age specifically, is about this 10-year age gap. Is the early millennials who are almost Gen X. So part of our childhood was that no mobile phones, the internet wasn't a thing, PCs in houses were the norm. They became the norm. So all these things became normal. Like, it didn't have CDs. You go into a shop, buying a tape or an LP was a normal thing. CDs came out while we were alive. This technological shift happened. So obviously when we were younger and we were taught things, we were taught obviously by the previous generation who hadn't gone through those things yet, because obviously they hadn't happened unless they were going through them. So we were taught the older technique of doing the research and looking things up and the way that we interact with the history. One of the things that I will say, though, is that I think console games, where they've got more space on hard drives and where a lot of it is online, so you don't physically need to download as more than sort of the core mechanics of it to have on your device, and you can easily delete a game and then put it back on, which is more of a thing that you would find for PCs back in the day. Rather than it's similar to taking the disc out and putting a new disc back in type of thing. But it's a lot easier and quicker to do that. My son will do that quite a lot. He'll play a game, he'll enjoy it, he'll move on to a different game, he'll come back to that game, and he'll try and platinum the game. It's insane how quickly he can platinum games. I am incredibly jealous of him. He will go, "Oh, what game are you playing today?" And he'll just turn around and go, "Oh, I decided I'm going to platinum this game this week." He'll come in 24 hours later and it's platinum. Like, how? How does he do this? But he's playing the game because he's playing a game. And this is the big thing that we were saying about. As you said, Angel, it's a big thing for you. It wasn't just the game; it was that experience. I think it was learning about the history side of it. While my son will do that, it's very interesting to see that's just something else that he does. I mean, obviously, different people, different personalities and things. One of the ones I noticed is God of War.
Right.
Obviously, I know quite a lot about the history of the time period. Obviously, Vikings.
Yeah.
It's a specific one. That one he plays a lot. And about the gods and things like that. And I was able to have discussions with him that I haven't really had with people, except at sort of like this or at university level people where I could just have a discussion. So he was learning more because of that. So modern games have got enough in there to create that interest and that easy access to YouTube on your phone, so you can have his phone there and look something up while he's playing the game to look up something interesting. Made him interested in it. And one of the things we talked about when he completed God of War is what are they doing next? So we'd looked at what they'd previously done, and there was I think it was the Egyptian one. No, there was a Greek one that they'd done. So we were talking about the different things, and we ended up talking about all these different historical time periods they could do, which would be great. Egypt sounded like the best one of all of this. He then got interested in the history from that. So I think we're starting to see this slight change with games coming out. One of the other interesting ones is games like World of Tanks, World of Warships, World of Airplanes. I used to play them quite a lot. They're fun. They are like those console games. You just play them quick, snappy. They can be played on your phone, PC, device, anything. The amount of people in there, and if you look at the handles, the user handles that you get around, those people are quite into that history. Even the Call of Duty and Battlefield as well. People will go and do that research. And the more historical games that have historical components rather than historical games that you have on consoles, the more I think that children are going to do that research with that access to YouTube on their phone right next to them, and their use of that information and stuff like this, where you could have us on next to you, listening, watching us while you're doing some historical research, while you're playing a game that may have a historical component, while you're doing anything else. You could be doing housework. I personally spend as much of my time listening to podcasts as possible. And there'll be anything. There'll be fantasy lore for Warhammer, which is so deep, it's amazing. But I might be listening to some deep historical podcast. So I have that constantly while I'm doing anything. I can't listen to them at work anymore. Apparently, it's frowned upon when you're serving customers to be listening to a podcast. But there you go. However, I think the technology starting on consoles is starting to catch up with how we got into those historical games and history from those games to start off with. I think consoles are starting to catch up to that. So I think we're going this thing of why they're all PC. I think that's going to start going away in about 10 years or so.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if years to come, Aiden, if consoles like especially the Xbox, since Microsoft makes the Xbox, I wouldn't be surprised if they start to have peripherals like a mouse and a keyboard, and they might release Age of Empires on the Xbox.
They've already been a thing because they tried that with PlayStation keyboards for ages, and then people turned around and went, "Why you just?"
Yeah, but I think what happened with the problem with Sony, I think they might have been a little too ahead of the time.
Yeah,
but I think it will work now. I think now it might actually be a thing that works.
There's a game that my son plays. It's insane. I can't remember what it's called. Essentially, it's some weird music thing. And it's kind of like, the old Guitar Hero or things like that, where you've got to hit the note at the right time. He's incredibly good at it. He's found it difficult, some of it difficult to play while he's using a controller. So he took one of my old keyboards and plugged that into his PlayStation, and he played that. So obviously he's got his screen. Now, if you look at the modern, say, Windows, the most modern versions of Windows, and the way people use tablets, there's becoming very little distinction between this app-based usage of a computer as there is between a console, where consoles get more powerful and have that use because they're permanently connected to the internet. The PCs are sort of shifting that way for the user-friendly side of it. It's one of the reasons I still use an iPhone, because the iPhone user interface is intuitive and it's simple. I don't want to have to think about what I'm doing on my phone. I want to be able to get it out and just do the things. That's a personal preference, but it's that ease of use that you get, and you see that obviously as Windows changes, you get more of that. I'm still annoyed that you can't edit your registry on a PC anymore unless you go through the houses and you have to download a certain program and go through certain things. It's like, I'm sure you remember back when we were playing sort of Age of Empires when we were kids, Angel, that you'd get on the PC and you'd try and find stuff in the registry edit. And Age of Empires was a classic one for this. If you wanted to put in your cheat codes and get your little car with the explosives on.
Yes. Yes.
But even that user menu was essentially using the same core writing code commands for it. It had it essentially. You're telling the code to go to this certain point to be able to get things. And obviously, cheat codes I find hilarious because they are built into the game. They have to be built into the game. Otherwise, they wouldn't work. They wouldn't be cheat codes. And I must admit, I have played Hearts of Iron with cheat mode. I used to play that all the time on cheat mode, but just to try different things out was hilarious. But even then, you could use those to try things out. And some of the things that I was trying out on it were actually for historical things. So I used to play as Russia quite a lot, just because you can build up the industry quite a lot. And you could either deal with stuff in the Far East or you could deal with stuff in the West. It gave you more scope, basically, because of where it's situated. And the army, the Soviet army initially at the beginning of the war, they had way more tanks than everyone else, and they lost all of their tanks. Pretty much all of them as well, actually, because their tanks weren't as good as the German ones. They got destroyed. They weren't using them properly. It's a very similar story to obviously the invasion of France, where their army was big and the army was good. It was just wasn't used correctly, and then the Germans through tactics beat them. So one of the big things I was thinking about is like, well, what if they went all infantry? Or what if they went all tanks? Or what if the Winter War didn't happen? So I then play it so the Winter War doesn't happen. To be able to do those certain things, you have to put certain cheat codes on to either make certain things, historical things, not happen, or to be able to build the army in such a way as the game wants you to play it how it historically was played. And that's, if you want to do something alternative history, that you do have to use the cheat codes to be able to change things. But I found that they're quite interesting, that interface and that way of using a game. And even on consoles, the classic Konami code is a big thing. And cheat codes on consoles, the old cheat cartridge for the N64 that you put in and then put your game on top of it. So
the Game
Shark. All those types of things. Yeah. But you don't see that anymore. Is if someone uses any kind of cheat code or a bot on it, and bots are so common. Constantly walking past my son's room and he's accusing someone of being a bot or using bots. And it's the fact that you can identify that, it's really weird. But that's a change in how the games are played.
Yeah, I think the thing about it is,
you can't do that in a historical game.
But the thing about it is, as single-player games, you can get away with it. It's the multiplayer games where cheating is, it's frowned upon.
And that's
and I get
difference. Yeah, you get this. If you're playing first-person games, there's a lot of them are multiplayer and open world, and people. And there was a brilliant one that my brother got my son into for a bit, and it was I forgot the name of it now. It's going to bug me. But it was that everyone was there, like in, say, a Fortnite or any other MMO type of thing, but you couldn't attack other people. Everyone was against the computer spawned creatures, and then you'd form together to fight them. You could fight other people. There was a challenge mechanic that you could, but you had to accept things. So if you didn't want to, you didn't have to. I thought that was a brilliant one. And that one was noticeably, people weren't using cheats in that because there was really no point. the whole thing of talking about this mechanic is the way that people do that is, and this comes back to the instant gratification thing. The only reason that you're using bots in a game like that is because you want to be the, oh, look how good I am, I'm better than everyone else. I mean, you are cheating yourself at that point when you're playing multiplayer doing that. Whereas the way that we used to use them was we played this game and we wanted to try a different aspect of it. So, like I was saying, with the Age of Empires, where you put the cars in it, was a bit of fun. But you wouldn't do that if you're playing against someone else unless you said, oh, well, we're going to use cheat codes or not. It would just be a different aspect of the game. As I said with Hearts of Iron, the reason I was describing that is I was using it to try out different historical scenarios. I was essentially trying to use it to create alternative histories to play around with. I still think my best one without cheat codes was I conquered the entire world, the Soviet Union, apart from California, Washington State. I think those are the only two places I couldn't get. It was literally just the west coast of the US, and it was the timing to get there. And once you completed a game like that, you know how to do that. You're starting to do these different things. But that's because I'm exploring history. I'm doing that because I'm like, well, I wonder if the Soviets just used infantry or just focused on tanks, or what happens if they use more cavalry? What happens if they really go into the whole Cossacks on horses thing in World War II? What does that do to those types of things? They're historical scenarios. It's learning about history, and as you said, Angel, is looking up the history from the game that you're playing. That's kind of a core component of it. Whereas when you're playing a first-person shooter, you might go, oh, that's a cool uniform gun. You might look it up. And generally, that's about it, really. Whereas when you're looking up a unit that you're using, you tend to look into the history of the unit. Why was the unit like that? Why was the uniform like that? And were these weapons appropriate for that type of thing? As well, it's like tabletop gaming as well. The change in tabletop wargaming as well, because realistically, early PC games, historical war games, were literally someone digitized tabletop wargaming. That's
Civilization
all of the original.
One of them, you could say. Oh, I got something cool to show you, Ethan. Give me a moment here. We'll get back to your point in a bit. I want to show you the old Civilization 2 manual.
Oh, yeah.
You know how big this manual was? 200 pages long.
They were doorstop books. I've still got most of my old ones.
Yeah, I mean, I like the little pictures they have here with, but that's the thing about PC games. None of them had big manuals, especially Civilization, because there was so much you had to learn about Civilization and all that. So
there's the game guides that used to be able to get that would go with the manual as well, and they were huge. So I've got one for Might and Magic, and it is thicker than most of the textbooks I have.
Yeah, so that's a whole lot of stuff you had to learn, just learn how to play Civilization 2. And I think that was the magic of PC gaming then. That was the magic. You don't get that same kind of magic with console games, or at least not yet. But as we discussed, that might be coming soon.
That's an interesting point as well with the manuals. I hadn't really considered, because in the manual, you not only is it telling you how to play the game, it's got those historical bits, as you said, obviously, and it's quite obvious from what you've shown us. You've got the pictures there, and you look at that picture and go, well, why is that person wearing that? Who are they from? Where's that connection? And you will look that up. Just basic humans are intrigued about these things. Because if you're downloading games, and this even happens to PC now, obviously, with Steam, but if you're downloading games, how often do you really go and read the tutorials or manuals? You'll just play the inbuilt tutorial and go, right, cool, I've got the basics of this down, let's learn how to play this. Unless you're playing something like Crusader Kings or Hearts of Iron, where you really have to pay attention to the tutorial. Otherwise, you completely forget an aspect of the game and lose constantly.
Yeah, one of those kind of games, right?
So, it's the learning curve side of it as well.
And I think what it is too is that some of these games have a big learning curve. Because console games are meant to be, pick up, plug and play, pick up and play and enjoy it. The PC games, at least back in my time and our time, it was definitely a learning curve. They wanted you to learn. It was supposed to be like almost kind of borderline edutainment.
Yes,
borderline entertainment. borderline.
Yes, consoles originally started as literally there's
It was like an arcade at home.
Lots of things. Yeah. So for example, my son's fine motor control because he plays console so much is insane. It's like I cannot move. Well, I'm also old with crippled hands, so I can't move my hands that fast in general. But I was never able to move my hands in that way. That manual dexterity that he's got, it's the decision-making processes on the fly that you get from those games. They have that certain aspect of them, but they're not designed to do that. Whereas these historical games are designed in such a way that, as you say, like with the diplomacy side of things, you've got to think through what you're doing. And you do get that to a diplomacy thing. You do get to a certain extent, but if you're playing, say something like, say, Dragon Age or that end of games, where your decisions make you. But then again, that is once again a tabletop game that has been made into a computer game because it's essentially just a different version of D&D, which is a tabletop game after all. And one of the things that I noticed, even with these fantasy games that are out there, is there's lots of historical connections to it. And I like seeing the fantasy games go, oh, that's brilliant, they've put that in. So nod to something that actually happened in history. People think it's pure fantasy, but history is full of these weird little moments as well. Like the time, I think it was the Danes lost their navy to a cavalry charge because it froze over. And literal men on horses captured ships. It's bizarre. You go and look it up, people. It's absolutely brilliant. But history's full of those weird moments, which you can put into that, and you can get nods, and it gets people interested. But as we were saying, obviously, with the improvements in consoles, we can get more of that. That information can be placed into that as well. But it's still the functionality of being able to use the consoles then becoming more like PCs as PCs become more like consoles. It's all about the input, keyboard and mouse or controller, really.
Yeah, I got another thing from our childhood I'd like to share. Another good old manual from our childhood. The original Age of Empires manual. Yep, I remember this. I honestly, I never had the manual for the first game because I actually started with Age of Empires 2. Then I went to 1. Ironically, I started with 2.
Same.
But you know what the funny thing about me is? I used to love Age of Empires 1 better, right?
Yeah.
But as I've grown, I've started to like Age of Empires 2 better. As I've grown with the definitive edition. I mean, Microsoft, they did a wonderful, and the developers, they did a wonderful job with the definitive edition, man. If you ever get a better computer, man, you gotta give the definitive edition a whirl, man.
I will have no money because I will be all over Steam definitive editions when I get a new PC.
Yeah, and the fact that and what I like about it, I think I told you already that you could play Age of Empires 1 on the AOT Age of Empires 2 engine, and honestly, I think it's the superior engine. But it's funny because Age of Empires 3 came out afterwards, but I wasn't a big fan of Age of Empires 3, believe it or not. And then it's Age of Empires 4, but I haven't even touched Age of Empires 4. I put some mixed reviews on it.
One of the things that got me back is seeing Age of Empires get a maximum of 200 people. When I started playing Cossacks, I found it very hard to go back to Age of Empires. Just like, I'm only allowed 200 people. Like in Cossacks, one unit is 200 people. Like, what is this? I've got like 10,000 peasants wandering around right now. Like my computer was getting to the point where I couldn't watch the battles that I was having on Cossacks because it just couldn't handle it didn't have the processing power to deal with that amount of sprites. But obviously, Age of Empires obviously friendly to the computer. But you've got the obsolescence as well. I notice it a lot with PC where you have to use certain emulators and things. I've got a lot of older games that I used to like to play, and running them in old modes was a little bit easier on a PC. Whereas consoles really went hard on the not even allowing second-hand games at one point. So they tried to destroy the game market.
There's a thing about that. Nintendo, the original the Nintendo. There was actually a thing where you actually had to agree. You had to actually agree to their terms and conditions publish games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and if you publish games on Sega, or then you were cut off. Yeah, it was kind of a blood feud between Sega, the Mega System, and the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah.
You know, not the Mega System, the Mega Drive. Excuse me, the Mega Drive.
Yeah.
Well, here in America we call it the Genesis. Here in America we call it the Genesis.
So you had that to a certain extent as well with PCs when Steam first came out. And then the games they were looking at. So I got Age of Napoleon, I think it was. I had a brilliant game. I like to play it. My dad, I got into a lot of these games from my dad. It's where I got into history from, in fact. But he'd given me one of these games, but he'd loaded it onto his PC. I think it was because he used to move around, he'd struggle to get certain internet connections and things. And then he'd managed to log it on Steam because you remember you used to have the booklet because you had to put the code in to say that you had officially had the game as well and hadn't stolen it, which kind of made sense. But as soon as Steam came about and you logged it on one thing, it's like my dad did this game so many years beforehand, and then he closed his Steam account like a year later. Didn't even have Steam, but as soon as that code was used, that game's now a brick. Like I can't use it because he put the code in once, and then it wouldn't let him play the game anyway. So he's like, so he put it in a box. It's like, oh well, perhaps my son will like this game, so he gave it to me, and I couldn't play it either, purely because of that that aspect. It was was it Total War? It was the Total War Napoleonic one. Well, no, I was really looking forward to playing it as well, actually. And that's one thing that I got a lot of lashback in the PC gaming community at the time. So I remember when I looked it up, I was like, is there a way of getting around this? Because that whole concept of proving it was your game by having the code, it was an access code. So as long as you had the code in the game, that was perfectly fine. And that was linked to the disk that you used to put on the computer. That's okay. That stops pirating. It makes sense, and it wasn't an issue. But as soon as you put it into Steam for one person, the inability for anyone else to use that game, even if they have the code in the game and they're selling on, and that was about the time that they started doubling down on the consoles as well. There's been backlash of that. And I think that also could be a reason why a lot of the historical games, the ones that we like and some of the bigger ones, they're all very, very old now. I mean, Civilization's still there. What, Civ 6 came out? That's got to be years ago Civ 6 came out, because I downloaded it. But I haven't downloaded the game for a good couple of years. But that's got to have been around a few years.
And there's another little funny thing about PC gaming. You remember I was talking about Nintendo and Sega, and that you could there was kind of the same thing between Microsoft Windows and Macintosh, the old Macintosh. that you could that if you had a copy of Age of Empires, but you were using a Mac, back then they called it the Macintosh, Apple, you were shit out of luck. you were shit out of.
And I think that's one of the things that is kind of.
And by the way, I'm sorry. And by the way, vice versa. If you had a game that was only for Macintosh, you could have run it on Windows. So there we go. So that was kind of an interesting thing. Although, I mean, there's still kind of that. But there's definitely a lot more workarounds now.
Yeah, they've realised the error of their ways. As iPhones are incredibly popular, but people have PCs. So they want to connect. Even that isn't absolute arse. I can't plug my phone into my PC anymore. That whole thing, because you used to have it with Apple iTunes. If you had it on, it was on anything. If you used Apple iTunes to put the songs onto like a phone or iPod, if someone did that for you and then you lost contact with that person, you no longer had any way of deleting or adding anything into the music on your phone. It was just instantly logged to that specific account, that was a very Apple thing they did as well. But all of that, when you add that all together, that means that people have to play the newer games. Now, really, when you think about it, is what new historical games have come out? Realistically, what we're seeing is remastered versions of the old games we used to play, which generally is because there's a community-driven effort to get them back, because it's people that have the time to play them, who want them. So the companies have turned around and gone, well, yeah, we'll do that. We'll remaster it. Not remaking it, though. They're remastering it. All they're doing is they're updating the code to work on modern devices. It's literally all they're doing with it as well. It's like as if that's a small task. It's obviously not a small task, but they're not coming up with anything new. This is the same complaint that people have about Hollywood films, where it's all just remakes or a couple of franchises where they just pump something out. You're seeing this lack of a new thing. Whereas if you look at consoles and console gaming, the amount of new games that come out for consoles that are really good, that are those top games, are amazing. But with PC games, it's quite rare to have that big hype behind it. It's weird. It's sort of like a game will come out and people go, "Can you play it on a PC?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, we've done a PC version of it." So it's like rather than where it was a PC game they'd port over to consoles, it was the other way around. But because console games aren't conducive to historical gaming in the way that we have understood it in the past, you don't necessarily get that so much coming the other direction, because they can't focus on it, because then the game will be a flop, because it will be unwieldy for the main users as well. And Crusader Kings, I think, is one of the I know it's not very recent. One of the group of games that it was a new game. Those group, and it's a whole group of games you can start from. I'm still waiting for them to do an Ancients version, because you can. Crusader King starts in. You have the expansions. I think you can get about to 700 something. But you can, if you complete Crusader Kings, you can then load up the next one, the Age of Exploration one, and you can play that. If you complete that, you can then go into the Age of Victoria, and then I don't know how you do it, but I think there's a way of then moving on to the modern version of Hearts of Iron, where you can control your thing all the way through their games. Absolutely brilliant system that they've got. Never been able to complete any of the games to be able to try this out and see how that works. However, it's that franchise really is. If someone asks you about a historical game that is more modern, it's really the only franchise that I can think of, and I'm a person who likes my historical games. But I don't know if there's any that you can think of that have come out recently that aren't a remastered version, that are actually a sort of a franchise or a new specific game like that as well. Obviously, I'm discounting World War II stuff because there is so much World War II stuff out there, and it's often just a World War II skin on an engine they've decided for something else as well. But I think that is one of the things. It's not so much that historical games are dying, but the way that the history side of it is accessed from games. Because it's so console focused these days, it's phone games and console games. And yes, there are PC games, but the way that people use their PCs is a lot different to obviously how we used to use them when a lot of these games came out. And I'm wondering if this, as I said, this revival thing like God of War, talking to my son about the mythology behind it. I'm wondering if that's now how we're going to see this change in historical gaming. Right. It's going to be the games that we played like that. It's going to be those games, and then them looking up the history behind that thing as well. There was one, he was trying to work out this character that he might meet from all of the stories. And he went and looked it up and watched YouTube. And so he was researching history to work out what was going to happen in the game as well. And it's that, getting people to go and look at history, I think it's a big important component of making a historical game, because it's that shared love of history that makes it. If you don't like history, then you're not playing those games as much. So you're going to just go and play whatever type of thing. But it's that focus on that research of history. And considering how many more people are into history these days, especially things like YouTube, what we're doing now with this live, the easy access to information on various different sites, like you've got I think even Medium's got some good articles and stuff like that. That access to information is bigger. People look at history a lot more these days, and I'm wondering if it's a case of that we had that access to those encyclopedia bits. Because back in the day, you get Encarta, or what was the other encyclopedia? You get it on disk and put it on your computer, the Windows 96 style stuff.
Yes,
your encyclopedia and you put it on there.
Yeah, I remember.
One that Lee was using the other day. So he was using the internet version of it, I think. But it just reminded me of, that was one of the other discs that you got. You had your encyclopedia on your computer. Like, physical encyclopedias have gone by the wayside now because we have the internet as well. So I'm wondering if because we've got all this historical information, whether the gaming experience with all of this stuff that we loved, all this history background and everything like that, changing it slightly for the modern age and the way that people access this information, of having that stuff in there, but making it easier to access that information outside of the game, rather than having it as, like we did, we read the in-game encyclopedias or the handbooks and things, them being not so much a thing. Increasing that access to go, oh, you like this bit of history, click on this link. You think you could do that with Age of Empires easily? The description of these people, brief description, want to read more, follow this link, and then it will take you to Wikipedia is good enough. Wikipedia's got most of the history on Wikipedia is actually really good as well, and it's a good starting point. So you can go there and you can research it. Having that integration in games, I think, is really good, and it will get more people into their games as well. Get more people into history. If you like the history, you look at things for that. So I like my tabletop wargaming. My friend got me onto a game, bought me the rule book for it as well. It's a Napoleonic war game using only smaller figures. It's also a horror game. So it's obviously big British, Sharp, first thing that comes to mind. It's like playing Sharp, but as a horror game, which is amazing on the tabletop. No, that's a great idea for a game. But you wouldn't have thought to mention that to me if I didn't have a love for that part of history. So if we get people liking those parts of history, those games will then be made for that. It's one of the reasons why you see so much World War II history, because people like to look at World War II history because it's big battles, tanks, guns, you can see it everywhere. It's very easy to access. So this is why the History Channel was wall-to-wall World War II and Nazis.
Right.
Until Storage Wars became a thing. And that's basically
ancient aliens at night.
Yeah, I still want Ancient Aliens to come back and do a Storage Wars. It's sort of like, I bought this pyramid. What have I found in it? That'd be brilliant.
But anyway, man, hey, this was a fun episode, but we are getting close to the hour. So I guess I want to make one last point and saying that I definitely think the dividing line or the barrier between PC gaming and console is shrinking. In other words, soon the console is going to start catching up to PCs in power and and ability. And like I told you before, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, let's say the Xbox, gets a keyboard and mouse peripheral, and they can start playing the PC classics on there. Hey, because listen, imagine you play Age of Empires on a big white screen instead of playing on a new computer. You'd be playing on a big screen.
I want to plug my TV into my computer now to play Cossacks. That would be amazing.
Yep. Yeah. but the idea is that the division between PC gamers and console gamers is getting it's not as large as it used to be. Let's say in the 1990s, early 2000s, yeah, that was a big difference between being a PC gamer and console. Not anymore. Because, and by the way, on PC you can now play console games like Resident Evil and all that. Yeah. So
and controllers, especially you said about Xbox being Microsoft, you can use an Xbox controller on a PC.
Right. And they even sell N64 controllers. You could emulate the Nintendo 64 games on PC and get a USB plug-in N64 controller. So and that works as well. So yeah, so basically what we're talking about is it's starting to become obsolete, becoming an obsolete thing. That's it. So it's kind of exciting in one sense, but it's kind of disappointing in another sense because it's probably because I'm coming from a place of nostalgia, memories, and so. But
it's exactly the same for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're from an older generation of kid. I mean, it kind of makes me feel like I'm an old fart now because it's not that because we're old, Aiden. It's because we come from a different generation of gaming. Well, we had dial-up. When were the days that your parents couldn't pick up the phone or you knock your internet connection out?
Oh yeah. I don't miss those days. But can
Yeah,
I
I miss
use
those
the
days.
internet, please? No, I've got to make a phone call later. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the Age of Warfare podcast. This was a really fun episode, and it's kind of tickled my past. And I think I'm gonna go play some Age of Empires after this, classic Age of Empires, because yeah, all this talk and
I kind of want to as well.
yeah, but man, this has been a fun one. Uh, but of course, remember our thoughts and prayers go to Lee Edwards with his daughter Jocelyn. I'm gonna talk to him in a few, see what's going on with her. Hopefully some updates. So we go chat with him, and I guess whenever he comes back or whenever he can come back, we'll be returning to the Alexander the Great series that we started. You know, I'm sorry, folks, and I mean, he has just been out. That has been a very tough summer for the guy, but you know, he did say he wants to continue the series, so we'll just wait for him to whenever he comes back. And of course, don't forget we have the charity anthology coming very soon as well. So how's your story coming along with that?
I've been now the kitchen's back in. I can write, which is brilliant. So I'll be doing some of that tomorrow. In fact,
Excellent.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Excellent. All right, guys. I think that's gonna do it for this episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks, probably with a new topic. Hopefully it's as fun as this one, but we'll try to make it as fun as we can, no matter what. But this has been Suetonius Nationalist Maximus. That's been the Gate, Aiden Cordia from the United Kingdom. This has been the Age of Warfare podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you go pick up a copy of Age of Empires and go play it and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, do that.
After hearing the geek out about it, I think you guys deserve it. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Take care, guys, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.